The smell of lilies and wet earth wouldn't leave my clothes. It clung to me like death itself, seeping into the fabric of my black dress, into my skin, into my very soul. Joseph was gone. My Joseph. Today we'd put him in the ground, and with him went 48 years of morning coffee together, of his hand finding mine in the dark, of that laugh that could fill our whole house on Sycamore Lane. I'm Miriam, and I'm 69 years old. And on the day I buried my husband, the day my world collapsed, my own son showed me exactly what kind of man he'd become. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to know something. I'm not looking for pity. I'm looking for witnesses. Because what Gerald did on that day, what he tried to steal from me when I couldn't even see through my tears, needs to be told. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I need to know there are still people out there who understand that some betrayals cut deeper than death itself. The house felt wrong without Joseph. Too big, too quiet, yet somehow suffocating with all these people moving through it after the service. My sister Martha had put together tea and sandwiches. She'd always been the practical one. Joseph's old army friends stood in corners, these big men who'd survived war, crying into their sleeves. They loved him. Everyone loved him. Everyone except our son, apparently. Gerald stood there in his expensive suit, checking his phone every few minutes. 38 years old, and he couldn't even pretend to grieve his father for one day. His girlfriend Tiffany, she was worse. 32, dressed like she was going to a cocktail party instead of a funeral, those fake nails of hers tapping on every surface like she was calculating its worth. When she hugged me, it lasted maybe 2 seconds. Her eyes were already scanning the room, probably adding up the silver. I caught them whispering by Joseph's mahogany sideboard. Not about Joseph, not about his kindness or how he'd worked 2 jobs to put Gerald through college. No, I heard the words market value and probate. My blood turned to ice water. Were they really discussing my husband's things while the dirt was still fresh on his grave? Martha must have seen me sway because suddenly she was there, holding me up. Miriam, dear, you're white as a sheet. You need to sit. But I couldn't stop staring at my son. He caught me looking and smiled. Not a real smile. The kind you give to someone you're about to use. Later, when most everyone had gone home, leaving that awful quiet that comes after a funeral, Gerald approached me. Tiffany hovered nearby, picking up a crystal vase like she was shopping. Mom, he started, using that voice he'd perfected over the years. The one that meant he wanted something. You must be exhausted. I waited. There was always more with Gerald. Tiffany's birthday is tomorrow. The words hit me like a slap. I stared at him, trying to make sense of the sounds coming out of his mouth. His girlfriend's birthday. Tomorrow. Yes, dear. My voice came out flat, dead. Tiffany turned from the vase, all bright smiles. The big 3 too. And Gerald was planning this amazing party for me. Tonight, actually. Here at the house. We'd already booked the caterers before, well before. She waved her hand like Joseph's death was a scheduling conflict. My legs felt like water. Here? Tonight. Well, yes, Gerald said, and now I could hear impatience creeping in. Obviously things are different now, but Tiffany's parents are already on their way. Some really important people too, people I need to impress for business. It would be terrible to cancel. He looked at me and I saw no sympathy in his eyes. Just expectation. Hard, cold expectation. We thought it might even cheer you up, Mom. Some life in the house. Cheer me up. On the day I buried my husband, my son wanted to throw a party for his girlfriend in my home. The home where Joseph's coffee cup still sat by the sink. Where his slippers were still by his chair. Gerald, please. Not today. This is your Father's Day. Surely Tiffany's birthday can wait, or you can celebrate somewhere else. That's when he showed his true face. His jaw tightened the way it did when he was a boy and didn't get his way. Except now there was something darker there. Wait. The caterers are booked, Mother. Do you want me to tell Tiffany's parents that my mother is too busy feeling sorry for herself to let us use the house? Feeling sorry for myself. That's what he called my grief for his father. Gerald, your father was buried this morning. My husband of nearly 50 years. And what am I supposed to do about that? His voice rose, sharp and cruel. He's dead. Gone. Life doesn't stop, Mother. Tiffany's alive. She's here. And she deserves her special day. I tried once more. All I do? What exactly is it that you do, Gerald, besides expect? He stepped closer and I smelled his cologne, too strong, too expensive. Look, if you won't help me host Tiffany's birthday, if you're going to be this selfish with your grief, then you can just enjoy living alone forever. Don't expect me or Tiffany to come around here again. There it was. The threat. my cooperation for his continued presence in my life. He was trading on my fear of being alone, using my grief as leverage. Tiffany sidled up, put her manicured hand on his arm. Don't upset yourself, Miriam. We just want everyone to be happy. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart that was already shattered. Something else. My will to fight. I wanted them gone. I wanted to crawl into bed and never wake up. Fine, I whispered. Do whatever you want. Just leave me be. A gleam lit up in Gerald's eyes. He'd won, or so he thought. Great. Knew you'd see reason, Mom. Now there are just a few papers Dad wanted you to look over. Estate stuff, routine. Since the lawyer will need them, might as well get them signed while Tiffany and I set up for tonight. He produced a stack of documents from his briefcase. My mind was fog. Estate stuff. Joseph had always handled these things. And Gerald was Joseph's son. Some foolish part of me still wanted to believe there was good in him. I can't focus on this now, Gerald. It'll just take a minute, Mom. Just sign here and here. Standard procedure. To confirm beneficiaries and settle some of Dad's bills. Through my tears, I could barely see the papers. I signed where he pointed, my hand shaking. He also pushed his phone at me, something about a transfer to cover funeral costs and the caterers. Just easier if I handle it all, he said. I wanted him gone. I wanted to be alone with my grief. So I authorized whatever he asked. The moment I finished, his whole demeanor changed. The fake concern melted away, replaced by satisfaction. All done. Get some rest, Mom. Tiffany and I will make tonight memorable. They swept out, leaving me in the crushing silence. Something cold settled in my stomach. Those papers, that transfer. The way he'd pushed, the way he'd smiled. His words echoed, enjoy living alone forever. If you're still listening, if you've ever been taken advantage of when you were at your weakest, write mother in the comments. Because what happened next proved that my son hadn't just disrespected his father's memory. He tried to rob me blind. That night, I locked myself in my bedroom. The sounds of Tiffany's party seeped under my door. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Each sound was a knife in my heart. In the bed I'd shared with Joseph for 48 years, I wept until my eyes burned and my chest ached with something deeper than grief. 3 days passed in a haze. Gerald and Tiffany vanished, probably recovering from their celebration. Then a letter arrived from the bank. A routine notification about a large withdrawal. My hands shook as I logged into our accounts. The emergency fund Joseph and I had saved for 30 years, our safety net, was nearly empty. $50,000 transferred out on the afternoon of Joseph's burial. To some holding company I'd never heard of. The room spun. Gerald's small transfer for bills had been a lie. He plundered our emergency fund while I was broken with grief. Then I remembered the papers. Estate stuff, he'd called them. I found them on the sideboard where he'd left copies. My signature, shaky and tear-stained, was on every page. They weren't routine at all. One was a power of attorney giving Gerald control over all my finances and property. Another changed the beneficiary on Joseph's life insurance to include Gerald for half. The third was an application for a home equity loan against my house, with Gerald as co-applicant. He wasn't just after cash. He was trying to take everything. My home, my security, my future. The grief for Joseph was suddenly joined by something else. A rage so pure it burned through my tears. My son had planned this. On the day we buried his father, while I could barely stand, he'd executed a calculated attack on everything Joseph and I had built. Enjoy living alone forever. Now I understood. He didn't just mean emotional abandonment. He meant to leave me with nothing. I thought of Joseph, of his integrity, his sacrifice. I thought of the double shifts he'd worked, the vacations we'd skipped, all to give Gerald opportunities we'd never had. And this was how our son repaid us. The broken widow who'd signed those papers was gone. In her place stood a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. My first call was to Arthur Henderson, Joseph's lawyer and friend for 40 years. If anyone would understand the sanctity of Joseph's legacy and the depth of this betrayal, it would be Arthur. Miriam, my dear, his voice was gentle when he answered. I'm so sorry about Joseph. How are you holding up? Arthur, I need to see you urgently. It's about Joseph's estate and Gerald. Something in my tone must have alarmed him. My office won this afternoon? I gathered everything. Bank statements, the fraudulent documents, proof of my son's calculated cruelty. Each paper felt like holding fire. Arthur's office was a haven of order after the chaos of my home. He hugged me, his eyes full of genuine sympathy behind his spectacles. Tell me everything, Miriam. Don't spare any detail. So I did. Gerald's demand for a party on his father's burial day. His threat to abandon me. The stolen money. The papers he'd pushed in front of me when I could barely see through my tears. Arthur's face grew darker with every word. He examined the documents carefully, occasionally whistling low or drawing sharp breath. When I finished, the silence was deafening. Miriam, he said finally, his voice tight with anger. This is unconscionable. What Gerald has done isn't just betrayal. It's fraud. Elder abuse. Coercion. The man should be ashamed to call himself Joseph Washington's son. What can I do, Arthur? He's my son, but he's acted like a criminal, Arthur finished firmly. And we must treat him as such. First, we freeze any accounts he might access. We'll contest every document you signed under duress. And Miriam, I believe we should report this to the authorities. My heart ached. Seeing Gerald in a courtroom, maybe in handcuffs, was a mother's nightmare. But then I remembered his sneer, his greed, his utter lack of mercy. He's become a threat, Arthur. To everything Joseph worked for. To my survival. He's left me no choice. I understand. I'll stand by you every step. Then he brought up what I'd already decided. We need to address your will immediately. I looked him straight in the eye. Draw up a new one, Arthur. Today, Gerald Washington is to receive nothing. Not a penny. Not a photo. Not even a memory. Joseph's legacy will be protected from his greed. Arthur simply nodded and made a note. It will be ironclad. Over the next week, the legal machinery ground into motion. Banks were notified. Accounts frozen. The new will was signed and filed, Gerald's name conspicuously absent. But I wasn't done. I decided to host a proper wake for Joseph. Not the travesty of Tiffany's birthday party, but a real celebration of his life. I called his dearest friends, the judge, the doctor, his jazz club buddies. I told them I wanted to fill the house with stories and laughter, the way Joseph would have wanted. To my surprise, Gerald called midweek, his tone almost friendly. Mom, I hear you're having people over for Dad Saturday. Tiffany and I will come to support you. That would be appropriate, Gerald, I replied, my voice carefully neutral. Let them come. Their presence would make what I had planned even more impactful. Listen, friends, if you've ever had to stand up to someone who should have protected you instead of preyed on you, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened at that wake changed everything. Saturday evening, my home felt alive again for the first time since Joseph's passing. Friends filled the rooms with gentle laughter and warm memories. Photos of Joseph through the years decorated every surface. His beloved jazz played softly. Gerald and Tiffany arrived late, dressed in perfect morning attire, but their eyes kept finding me, calculating, wondering if I'd discovered their theft. After an hour, when everyone had shared a memory, I tapped my glass. The room fell silent. Arthur Henderson gave me an encouraging nod from across the room. Near the door, a young man from Arthur's firm stood quietly with a briefcase. My dear friends, I began, my voice clear and strong. Thank you for being here, for filling Joseph's home with love. He cherished each of you. I paused, letting my gaze settle on Gerald. Joseph valued many things, but above all he valued integrity, loyalty, respect. Especially respect for family and the sanctity of grief. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. Tiffany's smile faltered. That's why it's been so painful to discover that not everyone shares those values. Even those closest to us. The room grew tense. People exchanged glances. On the very day I buried my husband, I continued, my voice hard as steel, my son Gerald demanded I host his girlfriend's birthday party in this house that very night. He called my grief selfish. He threatened to abandon me if I didn't comply. Gasps rippled through the room. Judge Abernathy's face went rigid. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. But his cruelty didn't end there. Right on cue, the young man stepped forward. Mr. Gerald Washington? Gerald looked at him, confused and growing pale. You are hereby served with notice of legal action pertaining to fraudulent financial transactions and a restraining order freezing specific assets pending investigation. Gerald snatched the papers, his face going from pale to purple as he read. Tiffany, reading over his shoulder, let out a squeak of horror. It seems, I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, that my son's desire to celebrate on his father's burial day extended to trying to steal his father's legacy and leave his mother destitute. This is outrageous. Gerald sputtered. She's confused, she doesn't know what she's saying. But Joseph's friends, people of integrity and standing in our community, stared at him with cold contempt. The bank records, Gerald, Arthur said quietly. And the documents you tried to force your grieving mother to sign will speak for themselves. As will the criminal investigation now underway. Tiffany backed away from Gerald like he was contagious. The woman who clung to him when she thought he'd inherit everything now saw him for what he was, a sinking ship. Gerald stood alone in a room full of his father's friends, exposed for the predator he'd become. Then he grabbed Tiffany's arm and fled, the door slamming behind them. The first strike in my war to reclaim my life had been delivered. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Gerald. The bank's fraud department investigated the unauthorized transfer. The frozen account strangled his cash flow. Arthur filed civil suits to recover the stolen funds and nullify any papers signed under duress. But worse for Gerald was the social devastation. Joseph's friends were pillars of our community. Word spread like wildfire. Gerald Washington tried to rob his own mother on the day of his father's funeral. Invitations dried up. Business associates turned their backs. The important people he'd wanted to impress now crossed the street to avoid him. Tiffany lasted 3 weeks. Once Gerald's accounts were frozen and his reputation destroyed, she packed up and vanished. Her loyalty, it seemed, had a price tag. The new will was simple and final. Everything would go to a trust for my lifetime, then to my sister, some nieces and nephews, and Joseph's literacy program. Gerald's name appeared nowhere. When Arthur sent him notice of his disinheritance, the voicemail started. Rage, self-pity, pathetic attempts at manipulation. I deleted them all without listening. There was no joy in watching my son's life crumble. Only profound sadness for the boy he'd been and the man he'd chosen to become. The legal proceedings were exhausting, but Arthur shielded me when he could. Some of the stolen money was recovered. The threat of criminal charges hung over Gerald's head like a sword. Slowly, my home became mine again. I baked Joseph's favorite cookies. I tended the garden he'd loved. Friends rallied around me, their loyalty a balm to my battered heart. Martha practically moved in, her presence a constant comfort. The peace I found wasn't gentle. It was scarred, hard-won, forged in the fire of betrayal and my decision to fight back. But it was real. I'd protected Joseph's legacy. I'd reclaimed my dignity. I'd survived. Sometimes I think about that broken woman who signed those papers through her tears. She thought she had nothing left. She was wrong. She had something Gerald never understood, the strength that comes from real love, real loss, and the determination to honor both. I'm Miriam Washington. I'm 69 years old. I buried my husband and discovered my son was a stranger. But I'm still here. Still standing. Still fighting. If you think every mother deserves better than betrayal from her own blood, write "mother" in the comments. If you've ever had to choose between toxic family and your own survival, share this story. Let other women know they're not alone. That sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. And remember, silence in the face of cruelty isn't weakness. It's gathering strength for the storm to come. Joseph would be proud. That's all that matters now. That and the hard-won peace of knowing I did what was necessary, no matter how much it costs my heart. Thank you for listening to my story. Subscribe if you believe stories like mine need to be heard. Comment where you're listening from. I want to know there are still people out there who understand that love sometimes means letting go, and that survival sometimes means standing alone. Until we meet again, remember, your grief is not selfishness. Your boundaries are not cruelty. And anyone who tries to steal from you while you're crying doesn't deserve your tears or your trust. This is Miriam, signing off. May you never need the strength I had to find. But if you do, may you find it just the same.